In this session, we're going to talk about some common errors that programmers make. The first and most likely mistake that programmers will make is declaring a variable, yet not initializing it. In many cases, the Java compiler will issue an error message to prevent this, but not in every case. So my advice is make it a habit to always initialize your variables. An apparent exception is when you're declaring a variable that will later receive input from the keyboard or some other input device. That variable can be left uninitialized because the act of inputting will do the initialization. Int and double, under or overflow. This goes back to the idea that a variable holds only a certain amount of data. In a previous session, I talked about them as containers, such as a gallon or a quart. They can hold up to a certain amount. After that, there is spillage. We need to be sensitive as programmers that a double or an int holds only so much data. We need to check values that are very large or very small to ensure that we're not going to cause an overflow or underflow. Roundoff errors occur with floating point values. The underflow, overflow loses data in the large sense. The higher order bytes, the ones that are larger values, get lost. Roundoff errors is lost in a smaller sense. Precision is questionable after a while. It looks okay, but it may be erroneous. We need to choose data types that will hold values larger than what we are reasonably going to handle. For example, if we were to count how many times a person had bicycled from home to the park and back, an int would work very well. It's unlikely that the person would cycle more than 2.14 billion times. However, if we were to use that int to represent different persons on the planet, giving each person a unique number, it would be insufficient because there are more than 2.14 billion people. So we would have to use a long. One thing that many non-mathematically oriented programmers tend to fall into when using floating point values is taking averages of, and that's usually okay. But what's done is the average is often taken early and later on again an average is taken. That is not correct. Always maintain the highest precision possible until the last minute. Usually rounding occurs before outputting data. Integer division is a source of trouble because programmers tend to forget that algebra and programming with integers is not identical. There is no decimal portion to an integer division. Only the quotient is returned. We have the modulus operator if you need the remainder, but always remember there is no decimal portion when dividing with integers, redundant objects. This is not an error as much as it's a misunderstanding. Many novice programmers fail to realize the meaning of objects like system.in. That represents the keyboard. My machine has exactly one keyboard, not more than that. So if I were inputting numbers into a program to do computations and I needed a letter or a string to represent a menu option or a person's name, I wouldn't create a new scanner object representing that keyboard. I already have one. I just reuse it. I type numbers on my keyboard. I type names on my keyboard, and I would type letters. I use the same keyboard. Therefore, I would use the same scanner. Finally, a bit of advice. Keep track of your most common mistakes. Know what they are. Most programmers repeat the same mistakes. Learn to identify them quickly and move on. Learn what you're doing wrong and learn how to fix it. Now, on the other side of this, sometimes it's good to intentionally make mistakes. That way you can learn to predict the behavior. You can hypothesize what will happen, make a mistake, and try. And that will gain in your learning. Play with it, experiment, find out, be scientific about it. Learn. The biggest piece of advice I can give is never try to avoid making mistakes. If you spend your time rigidly avoiding mistakes, you will find you don't grow, you don't learn. Make an effort to learn from your mistakes. So as you make them, you discover even more. Mistake really means there's something you don't know. That's the point of education. That's why we're taking this course, to learn something we don't know. We will make mistakes. That's fine. Don't keep making the same mistakes for the same reasons. Learn from them, make new mistakes for new reasons.